when we burn the candle at two ends, then we're doing no one a service. So besides for burning ourselves out, we're not there for our clients. We're not there for our family. And so if we're looking at ourselves as an investment for the rest of our lives, we have to take breaks.
This episode is sponsored by Therapy Notes, therapynotes.com. Be sure and check them out and be sure and use the promo code Gordon, Gordon, and you can try them out for 2 months for free. Over 15 years ago, when I started my private practice, I had to learn a lot, and most of it the hard way, and I don't think you need to do the same. Hi, I'm Gordon Brewer, a licensed psychotherapist, and welcome to the Practice of Therapy podcast, part of the Psychcraft network of podcasts. Join me in this journey of discovery as we have conversations with other leaders and professionals in both the mental and allied health fields. Join us as we explore both the business and clinical sides of running a private practice. Everyone, I'm Gordon Brewer, and this is episode number 329 of the Practice of Therapy podcast. So glad you've joined me for this episode, and I'm really looking forward to you listening in on my conversation with Rachelle Heinemann. And Rachelle is located in New York, and we had just a really good conversation. I was going back and listening to our recording, and some good stuff. Just thinking about self-care, about body image and networking and all of those kinds of things that she's involved in. And one of the things, too, is Rachelle has a podcast of her own called Understanding Disordered Eating. And so she's a pro at this whole podcasting thing as well. But I hope you'll enjoy our conversation. And it's something, at least for me, it was fun to have that conversation with Rachelle. But before we get to my conversation with her, I'd love for you to check out one of the tools that I use every single day, and that is the Full Focus Planner. And Michael Hyatt and Company developed this planner. I found out about it several years ago, and I've been using it now probably close to 5 years. But they've got a new product out that you can go check out, and you can find out about the planner by first starting at practiceoftherapy.com/full-focus-planner. And go to that page and click on one of the links there to get to the Michael Hyatt page. In full disclosure, that's an affiliate link, so I do get paid a small commission if you decide to purchase using that link. But one of the things about those tools that they have really helped me stay organized. And I just love sharing people my planner and pointing it out. And I know here we are almost halfway through the year, and usually we think about planners and being organized around the first part of the year, but I don't think there's any time that is too soon to start or too late to start. But be sure to check it out. I really love this tool. It's a pretty neat planner in that it is a paper analog. Most of us are so ingrained with digital products. I love the fact that this is just a paper planner, and because I think our brains process it differently. But I'd love for you to check it out. If you'll go over to practiceoftherapy.com/full-focus-planner, you can find out more about all of those products at the Michael Hyatt Company. I'm a big fan of them all. So just want to put that out there for you and to check it out. And also, before we get to my conversation with Rachelle, I'd love for you to find out more about one of the members of the Psychcraft network, along with some words from our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes.
Hi, everyone. We are Dr. Melissa Thiessen
and Dr. Karen Dick
of Intentional Therapist and hosts of the podcast Thrivival 101, a fresh take on self-care for female mental health clinicians.
As mental health clinicians, we all know that self-care is important, and yet, ironically, we often struggle with it ourselves. Even worse, we tend to do this in silence because who wants to admit we might be struggling?
Well, here's the thing. There are unique factors about our training, our work, and our gender socialization that contribute to this very real and normal struggle with self-care. The good news is that together we can break the silence and lessen the struggle.
We created Thrival 101 to help us all do just that. Through our 4Cs framework, connection, compassion, courage, and creativity, and interviews with other like-minded clinicians, we will help you redefine your concept of self-care, find a supportive community, and start taking steps towards putting you back in your schedule.
So you can learn more about us at intentionaltherapist.ca and can find Thrival 101 through the Psychcraft Network and wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Ready to upgrade your practice from a rusty bicycle to a shiny new sports car? Buckle up, because Therapy Notes is here to turbocharge your journey. It's the comprehensive practice management system you've been craving, equipped with everything you need to navigate patient records, schedule seamlessly, host remote sessions, craft detailed notes, and tackle insurance billing with ease. And guess what? It's your trusty sidekick, available whenever and wherever duty calls. Picture having more quality time with your clients, all thanks to this digital assistant that never clocks out. Here's the kicker. It's Gordon approved, so you can trust it's the real deal. Bid farewell to paperwork headaches and embrace a new era of efficiency and top-tier care. Ready to level up your private practice game? Swing by practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes and punch in promo code GORDON for 2 months on the house. Enjoy the show.
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome again to the podcast. And I'm so glad for you to get to know Rachelle Heinemann. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. And so we had a little bit of chance to catch up. But as Rachelle, as I start with everyone, tell folks a little bit more about yourself and how you've landed where you landed.
I'm Rachelle Heinemann. I'm a licensed mental health counselor in New York and a licensed professional counselor in Jersey and a certified eating disorder specialist. So my practice is, focuses on eating issues and body image issues. And I'm also trained psychoanalytically. So, part of the work that I do is trying to understand a lot of what makes us do what we do and why we do what we do. I also have a podcast. It's called Understanding Disordered Eating, and I talk about all that stuff. And I love working with other clinicians, doing trainings and things like that. So just sort of breaking up instead of just one-to-one therapy, bringing it to be able to do a lot more things. I think I was born to be much more entrepreneurial. I never saw myself sitting at a desk, or even once I realized I was going to become a therapist, I never saw myself doing the same thing every day. The sort of nitty gritties of how it came to be was, I guess, less important and less in my mind. It's like, all right, so I went to this training. It was great. I met some really good people and I got some really good training and it really resonated with me. So that seemed great. But I think that in terms of specifically the body image and the analytic piece, that probably started way earlier, with basically everybody that I knew being on a diet, being dissatisfied with their body. And also, as therapy became more accepted within, just all communities, it was something where people were going to therapy and saying like, oh, this is evidence-based. We have to do it this way. We have to do it, this is the one way that you can do this kind of work. This is the best way. And every other, which is sort of implying that the other ways aren't that great. But I think what I had a problem with is that doesn't really take the individual into account. And so thinking about my own experience and that I don't fit in any box, and a lot of people that I know don't fit in any box. I was like, okay, what kind of work can I do that can help me step out of the box and really understand the person who's sitting in front of me and actually help them, which is sort of where the analytic piece comes in. But I don't usually use the term analysis just because that gets people creeped out. It's not really like lying on the couch.
Right.
That's the
Right.
long and the short of it.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm really fascinated by as we were kind of chatting about before we started recording, this whole culture that we've created around body image and dieting, and how that really does seem to be one of the things that leads to eating disorders. And unfortunately we see it a lot with teens and that kind of thing. So how are you finding our cultural influence affecting your work in working with the eating disorders?
Yeah, it's tough. I think that there are so many more people on board than even a decade ago. So it's nice to see that people are interested in healing their relationship with food and ditching the restrictive diets and embracing all different body types. But sometimes it feels like we're swimming upstream in that the
Mhm.
norm is you got to attain this kind of body, which, every few years is changing. So you got to change your body every few years, I guess, even if you are able to attain perfection. And it sort of leaves no room for people to be who they want to be or even get to
Mm.
know who they are. All the perfectionism and of course social media impacts this negatively, the comparison, where people just sort of feel like in order to feel good about themselves, this is the kind of way that they have to look. These are the kinds of things they need to eat.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you got to basically die trying, which is such a
Mm.
waste of so many beautiful lives.
Yes, yes. And I know something that you're passionate about is just for those of us in this field of how we can, live into more effective self-care, which really ties into a lot of the work that you're doing with your clients.
Totally. Yeah.
Hmm.
And sometimes I love the term self care, and sometimes I hate it because
Hmm.
it has this very like, like a woo woo almost, like it's very
Hmm.
spiritual. Oh, you have to take care of yourself. It's very intentional and it's very, very specific type of person. But I think ultimately we just have to make sure that we know what we need and we're attending to our needs, whatever we call it, because ultimately when we burn the candle at two ends, then we're doing no one a service. So besides for burning ourselves out, we're not there for our clients, we're not there for our family. And so if we're looking at ourselves as an investment for the rest of our lives, we have to take breaks.
Yeah, I think that's something that I'm learning a lot more about, is creating more downtime or a Sabbath, if you will, for yourself. And I think we probably get influenced a lot. And I know we were talking about this before we started recording, just kind of how the parallel between the hustle culture and the
Mhm.
dieting culture kind of
Yeah.
parallel each other. You want to say more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting because when people have this pattern going on, what happens is even if they do address their relationship with food, say they have some sort of restrict binge thing going on, and they work really hard and they're not restricting or binging anymore, if they don't actually get to the roots of what's causing it, then very often it can come out in other ways. So their relationship with money or their relationship with work, because ultimately it's not about the food, it's not about the work, it's about what's driving it. But I think this restrict binge thing happens so often, of course, with food, but also with work, where we have to go 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 go. There's no room for breaks. It's just sort of in my mind it's very restrictive because it's very narrow. Like if I don't work, I will not make money. If I don't work, I will never make it. It's a very restrictive mindset. And then
Hmm.
there's like the F it, like, well, whatever, none of this is working. So I may as well just throw in the towel. I'll have like the entire pie of pizza plus 3 pints of ice cream and like
Hmm.
whatever. And we sort of go from like all in, not in. And what if we can just sort of like get in the gray and work a
Hmm.
few hours, take a break, have a really intentional goal for this week or quarter, but not anything that's going to, drive us into the ground. And so
Right.
the all or nothing is something that happens across the board with both of those
Hmm.
cultures.
Yeah. Yeah. It's in every, that old saying, in everything moderation. And
Yeah.
I think that's hard for us to do.
Yeah. I think that the biggest thing is where we derive our self-worth. So if we're talking about diet culture, is it from our body image or from our relationship with food? Like, are we the healthiest person on the block? And with work, sometimes it's how much money do I bring in? What does my practice look like on the outside? What are people going to say? As opposed to, do I feel proud of the work that I'm doing? Does it
Hmm.
satisfy me? Does it bring meaning to my life? Am I able to help people? And
Hmm.
that's what, brings us the confidence to do what we got to do, as opposed to what it looks like on the outside or how many dollar signs we have after our name.
Right, right. Yeah, as you were thinking, as you were saying that, I would just the word that came to, or words that came to mind are self validation. And yeah, how do you think people get there?
Ooh, this
Hmm.
is a tricky question because I think that no matter what we talk about on any podcast, to be fair,
Hmm.
it's not really about coming up with a bullet point, three bullet
Hmm.
points and following that, and then you get there. But I do think that, there's a few prongs to it that if you practice, and of course, it's not just about the practicing, you got to go to your own therapy and all that kind of stuff and really
Hmm.
understand what's going on with your self-esteem. But, one piece is, and people hate this, I hate this. I would roll my eyes at myself if I were, several years earlier. Some of it is a little bit of fake it till you make it, meaning that you sort of got to tell yourself, like,
Hmm.
just because I didn't make that kind of money or just because I didn't make that kind of impact doesn't mean I'm not worth anything. Or, I showed up today and therefore I'm exactly where I need to be. So I guess people would call it affirmations. You can even write it around on your mirrors, but just sort of
Hmm.
like talking to yourself in that way. Because I don't think we notice when we have this really mean voice in our minds all the time, and that's sort of dictating the tone. But another thing that I don't think gets enough airtime with self-esteem is, or the self-validation is mastery.
Hmm.
So when
Yeah.
we build mastery, when we do something and then we've achieved a goal, that's what sort of is another notch in the rung of building our own validation, our own self-esteem. So, especially as it relates to business, if you're, say, starting a practice out, or you're growing a practice, or whatever stage you're at, there's a certain level of how can we break it down into smaller goals? Because each time you
Hmm.
hit that goal, you're building yourself up. And then you feel good about yourself and you're more likely to do the next thing. And then the next thing is
Right.
support, getting it from other people and then reminding yourself that you have people around you that support you no matter what, who love you, and internalizing that is important. As humans, we always need that interaction with humans and connectedness in order to feel good. So, there's
Yeah.
several pieces to it.
Yeah. One of the things that I've just been real aware of, lately, I've shared on the podcast that my wife passed away back in November. And so drawing on the support of others and community has just been is the only way you can make it through anything. And I think on the other side of that, with kind of the validation, is that I think our toughest critic is the one that's internal. And
Mm-hmm.
so being able to get validation from others, not that you're trying to please them or build yourself up by that, but getting information from others about how they really see you can change a lot about
Yeah.
our own self-worth and that sort of thing. Because I think for the most part, most of us are way too critical on ourselves, and you know what we tell ourselves, the story we tell ourselves, as Brene Brown puts it, is just most of the time just bullcrap. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Hmm.
it's interesting because a lot of people go into practice because they're like, I don't want another boss in my life. I want to be my own boss. And
Hmm.
then they're their worst boss ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Well, I know one of the things too we wanted to try to touch on, Raquel, is we are, and I think this is a good segue in just thinking about community and being able to network, and that being part of our self care and being able
Mhm.
to do all of, be able to maintain what we do.
Yeah. I think people hear the term networking and some people get excited. Some people, get terrified, or it just feels so tedious. Like, oh, I've got a network. It's a thing that
Hmm.
I have to do. They say I have to do it. And so I guess I'll do it, but I don't really like it. And the way that I see it is, building relationships, making friends,
Hmm.
if you will.
Yeah.
And I mean, because ultimately what networking is building quality relationships that you maintain over time and they just deepen. So if you think about, let's say, going to a conference, you can meet with 50 people and just have sort of a surface conversation, or you can sit down with one person and have a real in-depth conversation and connect with one person. You come out of that conference after those hundreds of dollars and you made one connection. That, I think, is the true meaning of networking, is building
Yes.
these real connections. So I think when we think about it within the context of business and our personal life, yeah, of course, networking is important, in order to
Mm-hmm.
build referrals and whatever else, your audience, et cetera. But I think when we think about taking care of ourselves and making sure that we're not alone in business, especially because one-to-one work is kind of isolating sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
if we do the networking in the way that we're thinking about building friendships and really deep, meaningful connections, that's something that nourishes us just as much as it nourishes our business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that's again the thing that has been pivotal for me in my life, or just making those connections where there's maybe, there's different levels of, I guess, intimacy with that. I mean, not necessarily ooh la la intimacy, but just intimacy. Yeah. I mean, there's different levels of that. And I think the more that you can kind of share your internal world with people,
Mm-hmm.
and then come back with kindness and compassion around that, the
Yeah.
more that does just to help you feel more solid and feel more connected.
Yeah. Because ultimately, then that feeling stays even when the connection or the actual interaction is over.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something, going back to the internal validation, there's something that when we know that we're supported by our people, it doesn't have to be our best friends. It can be just this network of people that we've built. We know
Mm-hmm.
we belong. We know that we're valued. Those are things that really, make us feel good about ourselves.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. What sort of parting thoughts would you want to leave for people around these
Mm.
topics?
I think that a lot of this is about perspective and about how you approach doing what you have to do versus what you
Mm-hmm.
want to do. So for example, if someone hears the term self-care or networking and it feels like a chore, then how can we see this in a slightly different way, in that what can I do for myself? So if maybe networking can be called how can I make friends in the field, or self-care can be called I don't even know what, but just something
Mm-hmm.
else that
Yeah.
speaks to us, so that it's something that we get excited for and that we want to run to do because it lights us up, as opposed to
Mm-hmm.
something that we have to do, kind of like what
Mm-hmm.
what everybody says, in marketing and all that stuff. I think then things become much more intuitive, much more natural, and we get the best out of it in that
Yeah.
way.
Right. I'm always, as you were saying that, I was reminded of one of my favorite, I guess, people. He's deceased now, but it's Joseph Campbell, and his whole quote on "follow your bliss." And when you do that, I'm paraphrasing the quote, but when you do that, doors will open for you where you didn't even know there were doors. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think being able to figure that out for yourself is such an important piece. And as people hear from me all the time on the podcast too, is knowing your why, understanding your own internal motivation for doing anything that you do.
Yeah. And that reminds me of this idea of luck. Like some people are saying, oh, this person is so lucky in business. They
Hmm.
have so many referrals or whatever it is. And I think that ultimately there is sure a percentage of it that's luck. And some people have the personality. But then there's also how many opportunities can you create for yourself that you might be more
Hmm.
likely to get lucky, in which case, sort of what you're talking about, the doors opening in the quote,
Hmm. Yeah.
just doing this for yourself creates more opportunities. And then
Right.
you'll, I don't want to use the term lucky, but you can get more
Hmm.
lucky in those
Yeah.
cases.
Yes. Yes. Well, Rachel, tell folks how they can get in touch with you if they want to learn more about you and learn more from you and about your podcast as well.
Yeah. So you can either go to my website, that's RachelleHeinemann.com, and you can find everything there. So there's like all my freebies and my podcast is there, but you can also follow me on Instagram at Rachelle Heinemann, and I hang out there too. We're just, on stories. And the podcast is called Understanding Disordered Eating.
That's great. That's great. And we'll have links in the show notes and the show summary for folks to get to that easily. So, well, Rachelle, I hope that we can do this again. Well, again, a big thanks to Rachelle for being on the podcast with me. She was such a delight to get to know, and hope you enjoyed listening in on the conversation as much as I loved having it. And you can be sure and check out Rachelle's things by going to her website at rachelleheinemann.com. And you'll find links here in the show notes and the show summary to learn more about her and the work that she's doing just around body image and self-care and all of those great things. And also, before you go, be sure and check out the Full Focus Planner and all of the Full Focus products that are produced by the Michael Hyatt and Company. And you can get to that by going to practiceoftherapy.com/full focus planner. As I said at the beginning, I have been using those products for several years now and use it every single day. So it's like my second brain, and I'm really pleased with using it, and I'd love for you to check it out. And also, big thanks to our sponsor of the podcast, Therapy Notes. They're who I use in my practice. Absolutely love that platform and how it helps me stay organized in our practice and track everything on the clinical side, including filing insurance claims, doing telehealth, and billing and all of that sort of thing. So be sure and check it out, practiceoftherapy.com/therapy notes. And be sure and use that promo code, just Gordon, Gordon, to get 2 months use of for free, just to see if you like it. And if you ever have any questions about Therapy Notes, I'm glad to talk with you about it. And I'm very grateful that they're a sponsor of the podcast. So if you'll take time, if you haven't done so already, to be sure to follow us or like the podcast or subscribe to the podcast, depending on which platform you're on. It only helps other people find the podcast, and also leave us a review. I always appreciate honest reviews and getting feedback on the podcast and the things that we're doing. So glad you're with me on this journey, and I hope that you'll be back for our next episode. Got lots of great guests lined up ahead of us, and take care, folks. Have a great rest of your week or weekend. You've been listening to the Practice of Therapy podcast with Gordon Brewer, part of the PsychCraft network of podcasts. You can find out more about the other great podcasts in the network by visiting psychcraftnetwork.com. And if you haven't done so already, please visit us at practiceoftherapy.com and get your free private practice startup guide, along with a lot of other great resources and webinars and free things just by visiting. Also, be sure to follow us wherever you might be listening to your podcasts. This podcast is intended to be educational in purpose and is not intended to give legal, accounting, or counseling advice. If you need a professional, find the right person for that.